I came to Ukraine expecting to find broken buildings and broken people, and instead I found truly the most beautiful people I've ever met. I thought I was coming to help you guys, but you've clearly shown me that I have far more to learn from you. I think now more than ever is that call to action to have that international collaboration, because we've never been in a better time. This was the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. How do I do more? The real answer of why I truly became a maxillofacial surgeon was because my dad told me to. I was actually all set to be an accounting major in Washington State University, and I had gotten accepted and enrolled in my classes. And then one day I just kind of had the question of hey, Dad, what do you do? And he was a prosthodontist, who's someone, who makes dentures and stuff, but he worked every day with oral surgeons. And he said, I think you would really like it. And so I went and I shadowed an oral surgeon, and I'll just never forget, I came into the operating room and they were doing a bimaxillary all-on-4, which if you've never seen surgery before, is a pretty intense surgery. And I just remember coming in and seeing this guy's face open, and everyone was laughing and listening to music and just talking about their day. Meanwhile, I'm like, is he okay? Is this? And I realized that this was their everyday, and that this was normal for them to just do this really amazing, incredible work, but just in such a relaxed setting, because, they were just so good at it. And I was like, wow, that's what I want my everyday to look like. And so I always say, it's not that I was ever passionate about oral surgery. I was passionate about the intensity and working with your hands and problem solving in a team environment. And so it was really an accumulation of my passions more than anything. With regards to becoming a leader and working in a team environment, I think for many people, you never try. It's something that kind of happens organically over time. And so, if I really think about my life, it was really a bunch of times where I was put in leadership positions, failed, and then learned a lot from that, and then just kind of kept finding myself in that environment. So when I was a little, young kid, I was the captain of some baseball teams, and I remember kind of blowing that. And then I remember being an RA in college, and I had no training because I came in halfway through the year, and again, I kind of dropped the ball on that one. And then, through dental school and residency, all of these things, I had all these opportunities to be a leader, and I just felt kind of drawn to it. And, I would say that when I started AROMS, that was truly the accident of a lifetime. I never meant to start a company. I literally just said, hey, I have to have something better so that I could be trained. And as I did that, I thought maybe some other people would like that too. And then when that turned out to be the case, we just kind of ran with it. I think the thing that's been the most amazing is just taking help wherever you can, because you just learn so much when you're willing to take feedback, and relying on people who are willing to take you under their wing. So, I never had any intention of ever going to Ukraine. Obviously I had heard about the war and stuff, but it wasn't until a colleague of mine invited me, and then feeling so supported by CMA and all of the doctors, I was like, this was the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. How do I do more? And, with AROMS, it was just one of these things where, again, people after people would come to me and just say, hey, I would love to work on this. And I would just see their passion behind it. And we were all like-minded people. I felt like we all had the same vision and the same energy. And I was like, I think you'd be a great fit for this team. So, I don't think I ever meant to do any of the things that I'm doing today. I think it all just happened because I love what I do. I love the people I've met. And because I think we've always just stayed very true to ourselves, we've had such great growth and success, because it was never forcing anyone. It was all just enjoying the process. So yeah, it was just a matter of having a absurd amount of luck and a lot of love and support that led to being where we are today. But I promise you it was not on purpose. Nobody really understands this, but I made AROMS solely because I thought I was going to get kicked out of my residency program unless I started to turn it around. When I had finished my intern year, I had terrible reviews, I had terrible test scores, I was just not a good resident. I was, talking too much at all the wrong times and always in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so in our training, we had to kind of like disappear for 3 years. You did medical school and general surgery, and then you were expected to come back and be this like senior resident and to have all the answers and to know what to do. And I just remember saying that when I come back, I am going to prove that I have used this time to learn as much as I can. And so we used to round at 5 a.m. And when I went to med school, class didn't start until 8 a.m. And so I just said, I'm going to still show up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to sit outside of the classroom and I'm going to read textbooks every morning. And I did that for 4 years. And I read about 6 or 8 textbooks, and that turned into, about 165 lectures. And then my best friend just happened to be an app developer. And then my other best friend just happened to know how to start a business. And then we made some calls, and next thing you know, we had this like little baby company. And so we were like, I guess we need to learn marketing, and I guess we need to learn how to like structure a business. And honestly, just by the grace of God, it survived. And because I think people saw the potential, they liked it. But now what started as just like a little passion project, so I didn't get kicked out of my program, turned into this entire global educational ecosystem. And so when I started AROMS, it was simple. I wanted to just have one place that I could go that told me the answer. It didn't tell me to go look somewhere else or give me some vague answer. I wanted to just know what I needed to know to be able to treat that patient. But now, 5 years later, we're learning that there's such a need to just modernize education, and we find ourselves just totally expanding in this online education space. And now we have the ability to work with organizations like Stryker and Dupuis Synthes. We're working with KLS and all of these other incredible organizations who have a similar vision, which is how do we improve the medical education space? And so now our mission in AROMS is simple. We want to completely standardize a global educational platform for our specialty, to unify the specialty and to bring everyone in to collaborate, to have the most transparent, up-to-date, accessible resource. Our model is every style of learning for every stage of your career. And what that means to us is that from your intern year where you're learning the basics to getting board certified and preparing for the national exams, to then being 10, 20, 30 years out into practice, what do you need to be the best that you could be for your patients? And so, what started with lectures has now turned into this 6 different styles of learnings, from flashcards to papers to videos. And then from now, it's really growing into, hey, how do we incorporate things like AI to customize it just to you so that you are getting this really personalized experience? And then how do we attach data to that so that we could really see its growth and understand what do we need to do to continue to modify it so that people find this highly valuable. And so, and a long story short, our goal is to make something that every surgeon in the world can use and find value and contribute to. I didn't pick Ukraine. Ukraine sort of picked me. I just happened to be at a hospital in the middle of rural Pennsylvania, where one of the most, well-published, almost retired ENT surgeons happened to work, Dr. John Frodel. And the day I walked into that new job, he had kind of heard about me, and he came right up and said, hey, I heard you like to do facial trauma. Would you ever like to go to Ukraine with me? And I have this thing where I just always say yes to amazing opportunities because you just never know where they'll take you. And so I was very afraid at first, and at this point, I will never forget seeing on social media when the war happened, because that was the first time that I was alive that a major war had really broke out, and especially that was like so visible to the real world, because there was Iran and Iraq and all of those wars, but now all of a sudden footage of the battles were happening on your social media reel, and I'll just never forget seeing that and being truly devastated by understanding what war is, which is just awful. And so I remember thinking, okay, if I was ever going to go to a mission, how great would it be to go somewhere that maybe not everyone wants to go right now, maybe somewhere that truly is in a time of need, and what if I could just be some small part of that, even just to share my story of what I saw. But what I tell everybody, because then they say, why did you keep coming back? Like, what's your affiliation? Are you Ukrainian? Why are you learning Ukrainian? And I'm not. I'm Italian and German. I have nothing to do with Ukraine. I know. But for me, it was very simple. I came to Ukraine expecting to find broken buildings and broken people, and instead I found truly the most beautiful people I've ever met. The biggest smiles, the most amazing sense of just, they were so grounded and grateful, and dancing in the streets, and Saturday nights, doing salsa classes in Times Square and singing songs like it was out of a movie. And I just remember thinking, this isn't a war-torn country. This is literally the most amazing people I've ever met. And I thought I was coming to help you guys, but you've clearly shown me that like I have far more to learn from you. And I know that sounds cheesy, but like it was real. Like when I saw them, I was like, how? In America, we're not this happy. We're not this, grounded. We're all struggling with our own little battles, and yet you guys are just together. And it was beautiful. And so I always say, like, I came to Ukraine expecting to do surgeries, and instead I fell in love with the people, and I fell in love with the cause, and I was like, this is what I want to dedicate anything I can to. And then when I saw what CMA was doing with EduCare, and what I saw what Leap Global Missions was doing with craniofacial surgery, I was like, this is everything I love, all in one. Sign me up, put me in, coach, I'm ready. Yeah, it's so funny because I now know that there is like a very traditional sense of teaching in like the Eastern European model. And, a lot of these individuals had a residency experience that was nothing like ours. Ours is very structured. You go on rotations and your surgical skills increase. Here, residencies could be almost more of like an apprenticeship. And, it's not really guarantee what you'll see or do. And there's also, a big difference in the systems of healthcare here, where maybe not everyone is super willing to teach all the time. And there's, concern of competition and such. So the doctors that I have worked with are just, they are just so open to any feedback. I think the craziest thing that I think about every surgery I do is that, I work with Dr. Roman a lot, and my understanding is that he's in his late 50s, possibly early 60s, and he is the most humble individual I think I've ever met. He's so kind, and he just, anything I say, he tries to do and implement, and I don't know any surgeon that late in their career that is that open to feedback. And so, when I started, they had done a few, sagittal splits, I think maybe tried a Lefort or two, but they were very timid to do these big, complicated surgeries. And these patients here are very complicated. They have very big, asymmetries or conditions. And now, just really honestly, a year later, you could just see their confidence is through the roof. And I think that's what's been so amazing, is that I have loved, seeing how engaged they are, how open to feedback. And every surgeon that I have had the chance of working with has been just very talented. And it's crazy to see how fast they've grown with just a little support, And so, yeah, that has been the most impressive part to me. It is the easiest question that you could ask me, right? Because our last mission, I had the opportunity to work on a young girl named Yana. Yana had a condition called hemifacial microsomia, and she was a class 3, meaning that she had no ramus condylar unit. Her jaw basically stopped halfway on her face, and she had complete collapse, massive asymmetry. And I just remember meeting her for consultation, and the very first thing thinking, oh my gosh, this is a very advanced, condition. And then I remember seeing her on social media after the mission. She started following me in preparation for the next mission. And I just remember seeing her posts and being like, oh my gosh, this is like a incredibly confident, beautiful, just like well-spoken young woman who is just taking life on head first despite having this huge disfigurement. And she's just got the most beautiful, attitude on life. And that was like really moving. Fast forward to now doing what was without doubt the most intense surgery I think I've ever done in my career, which was basically, it was a segmental Lefort, it was a sagittal split, and then a costochondral rib graft. But it was over a 32 millimeter correction from the pagonion, which is what we call the bony chin. So her entire face had to be shifted and re-advanced. We did soft tissue recontouring, or bone recontouring and soft tissue grafts all, and it was about a 10-12 hour surgery when all said and done. And you have to remember that you're in an OR you've never been in, with a team that you've just met, instruments that you don't have all the parts for. So to do that was, it's a lot to take on, but everything went so well. And then what just made my day was I would just get these pictures and these messages from, Dr. Christina. She would send me every follow-up and post-op, and then I would actually hear from Yana. She would message me on social media too, I'm doing okay, like I have a question, and so I got to follow up with her. And now we just saw her for her 6-month follow-up, and she's doing so great, and she needs just a few more small surgeries just to finish everything off. But that was probably the first time in my life that I ever felt like maybe this changed this person's entire life. I know what we do is great. I know that our patients are grateful, but there's just some that stand out so much to others. So I tell her all the time, I'm like, I'm not even ashamed of it. You're my favorite case I've ever done. So yeah, no, the story of Yana is honestly gives me it's one of the most proud surgeries I have in my career. I actually just came back from the American College of Maxillofacial Surgery. They had a conference, and one of the presentations was the advancements of AI into surgical workups. And so now what's so amazing is we're able to take the same process that we've done before, but now we're using AI to just absolutely jam-pack data into our workups and our analysis. So it's doing everything from taking our scans and making them ultra high resolution to doing predictive soft tissue tracings, giving us much more accurate ideas of what the VSPs can be, filling in any gaps in the scans. And with that, now we're able to do, I think you're going to see an absolute boom in patient-specific prosthesis, and you're going to find all these custom plates and treatment plans that take into factors things that we used to try to do by hand, but now with so much more efficiency. And I also think we're going to use those same methods to follow up our patients, compare pre and post-op scans to see, is what we planned actually what happened and how did that change over time, and then put those into adaptive learning modules to then start to actually make a smart treatment plan system. And I talk a lot about the innovations of AI in education, and I think what we're going to see is AI is going to process this data for us to just make us these kind of like super clinicians, where now we can actually look at so many things, how on point were we, how accurate were surgeries, how are their outcomes, what should we do next, and how do we just keep learning. So I think, especially with all the soldiers, you guys have such a large volume now of patients with these high energy ballistic injuries. And I think we're going to be able to just compare how we treatment planned and how we manage them and start to make really good algorithms for different wound classes and treatment protocols. And that's the stuff that I get very excited about. It's a funny analogy, but it's such an accurate one. Recently, in the past 5 years or so, Starlink became a very prominent thing where now all of a sudden with these satellites, we could get ultra high speed internet to very remote places that we couldn't before. On that very same note, we're now finding that we could collaborate on an international level like never before. And that is where I think it's so exciting. So now this is my 3rd mission in Ukraine, and every mission we've come with, the highest end patient-specific prostheses, these implants made just for them. And the way we've been able to do that is that the doctors here in Ukraine have been able to work them up and then send it to us in the United States. And then we're able to hop on a Zoom call and treatment plan them together. And so I think now more than ever is that call to action to have that international collaboration, because we've never been in a better time, and that was always the criticism of a lot of these missions, right? Was that, well, you go and do these complicated surgeries, but how do you ever know how they're doing? How do you know the impact you've had? I could just call them now. I could just text them. We could hop on a Zoom call. I could reconstruct the whole surgery virtually, and we could plan and follow them up, So I think a lot of those barriers that used to exist are gone, and I encourage everybody now, if you have a skill set, to reach out to these kind of organizations, because, very many places, even the most rural parts of the world, still have now access to things like the internet, and we're able to bring these treatment plans to them, and that was just not something that existed a decade ago. Well, I know that that's a really big part of what Educare stands for, and I also know it's a really big part of what CMA stands for, and it's in total alignment with what AROMS and LEAP Global Missions stand for, which is, what started as a mission has now turned into a independent center, and that's now turning into an academy. So, at the end of this mission, we're having a symposium with over 30 doctors that are now speaking internationally and sharing information, and these doctors are now going to go and start to practice this in those areas too. So, there's talk of us going to places like Odessa and Kyiv and future missions, and just continuing to scale our operations that we've done in Lviv. And so I think you guys have created a beautiful model. I mean, it's the definition of give a man a fish versus to teach a man to fish. And so I think the impact is going to be tremendous, throughout the years. Yeah. And so, at the end of the day, what we are truly trying to create is a gold standard for education. And what that means is that if you are an oral maxillofacial surgeon anywhere in the world, you have access to an incredible resource that has been calibrated and conditioned and proven over time to be an effective method of studying and learning at the highest quality. I think there's sometimes misconceptions out there of, well, why is this resource better than the other, or things like that. And for us, it's so important to say that our mission is to be as transparent as possible, to accept all feedback so that we can make it the absolute best resource it could be, because we know that there are people out there that are using this to train on. And so we take that as the highest level of responsibility. If there's anything that we can make better, we are on it as fast as possible. And what that means for the Ukrainian people is that if you are in an area where maybe there's not a lot of physicians doing those types of surgeries, or maybe if these are areas that are new to you in your practice, you can go somewhere and have vetted resources that are proven to be effective in teaching you the core fundamental skills and prepare you to then be able to work and do in-person, whether it's a workshop or observationships or externships. But the idea is that now we can bring a structured education system anywhere in the world. And I think that that is just such a great, step in alignment with things like EduCare, where we're truly saying, how do we take what is considered the gold standard of education and bring that anywhere in the world, even the underserved areas. And that's just such an incredible thing I don't think we ever thought of, 5 years ago. I think if I could say anything to the doctors of Ukraine is, if you are interested, get involved, because there are incredible resources that you have now. You have incredible organizations like CMA that are able to connect you to physicians. And even if we're not able to do a mission to your location, it's now possible for you to go throughout Ukraine and to see these surgeries done live. You have the ability to connect with surgeons all over the world. And I'm talking about incredible surgeons from major organizations like UT Southwestern and Yale and Harvard. And these are doctors that are just so eager to teach and learn. And so if you are interested, get engaged. Because you now have the chance to experience and see training that maybe was never available to you before. I think it kind of goes to the same thing. A great example is one of the people that joined us on this mission for the very first time. Her name is Darina, and it was so simple. She was Ukrainian. She was in dental school here in the United States, and she just saw the work that we did, and she reached out, and 2 months later she's on a mission with us. And that's just to show that it just takes asking, and if you want to get involved, just reach out, because everybody involved in this, is such a believer of the mission and the purpose. You'll have all of the support and the resources that you need. So I think, the one small step you could do is just ask how you could help, and I guarantee there's going to be a job for you if you want.